grew up with three big brothers. I call them my big brothers because they're older than me. They're also my big brothers. All three of them are over 6 feet tall. Now, if you've ever grown up or lived in a house with big brothers, or any growing adolescent for that matter, you know that they eat a lot, right? Yeah. That they're kind of hungry all the time. They have this insatiable hunger. It's like a bottomless pit that cannot be filled, right? Can I get an amen? Yeah. So my big brothers, they were always hungry. I felt like they were always showing up, and usually with friends, with hungry friends in tow, and they would just wander in. I picture them coming in and looking around, maybe opening the fridge, opening the cupboards, and they're like, "Do we have anything to eat around here?" That was their way of saying, "Hello, here I am. Good to see you. Got anything to eat?" I like to think of Jesus and his disciples as kind of like a band of brothers. Jesus and his disciples, they were really good at wandering from town to town. They were always showing up at people's homes and in people's villages, and they were often pretty hungry. And they often had some hungry friends in tow. They kind of mastered the art of showing up and teaching and preaching and healing and being fed in a lot of these stories. People welcome them into their home. And they did some feeding themselves. The disciples and Jesus, they threw a mean potluck, if you like loaves and fishes, that kind of thing. So I imagine Jesus and his disciples a little bit like my big, hungry brothers, showing up unannounced, unexpectedly, with friends in tow, and they eat everything in sight, but you're always glad they showed up. Now, in the story that Ernest just read, even post-resurrection, after Easter, he's risen from the dead. Jesus shows up asking, "Do you have anything to eat around here?" So we're on a beach. Okay, it doesn't actually say we're on a beach in this version of the story. That's actually in John's version of the story. But I love the image of breakfast on the beach. And wherever it's taking place, it's this impromptu post-resurrection picnic between Jesus and his friends reunited. So let's say we're on a beach. And here comes Jesus out of nowhere. And after the requisite "peace be with you," and "do not be afraid," and "no, I'm not a ghost. Yes, you can touch me," what does he say next? Yeah, he says, so they're in their joy. I love this. Their joy and their disbelief is mixed all together. And he says to them, "You got anything to eat around here?" And they take a piece of broiled fish, and he takes it and he eats it in their presence. So I wonder, what's this moment of the story about? Why is this part of the story we've told over and over again for millennia? What's going on? Why would Jesus ask for something to eat? What do you think? Something concrete and real. So right, he's here post-resurrection, kind of proving that he's here, it's real, it's something concrete. Why else would he ask for something to eat? Communion, like Holy Communion or communion among friends, maybe both, yeah? Why else do you ask for something to eat? You're hungry! Yes, sometimes the most obvious answer is a good one. That's right, Jesus, and you're hungry. And what does hunger do? It's real and it's concrete, and it connects us in communion. Say that again. It's human. Yeah, so Jesus, here comes Jesus in his most divine, right? Conquering death. And yet his most human. Even after the resurrection, Jesus shows up hungry. And it turns out that rising from the dead, it really works up an appetite. In fact, there's another story in Mark where the story goes that there's a little girl and she's either dead or it appears that she's dead, and Jesus comes and the father's distraught and he heals her. And what does he say right after he heals her? She gets up, everyone's amazed, she walks around, and then he says, "Get this girl something to eat." Are these rising from the dead? Apparently, yeah, it really gets us going. It works up an appetite. And so why else do we share food for communion, community? It's festive, right? It's celebratory. On the last day of class, what did everyone always say to do? You brought food or cupcakes, exactly. You bring some food along and it's an automatic party, right? So on this morning, when he's reunited with his friends, it just makes sense to share some food together. And now, going with the idea of communion and community, why else would you ask someone, "Hey, you want to grab something to eat?" What is that doing? If you say, "Hey, is there anything to eat around here?" Yeah. It's lunchtime, totally. And maybe you want to go with somebody to lunch. It's a way of building relationships, yeah. It extends your time together, yeah. It's a really good excuse to keep hanging out. It's good fellowship, yeah. We know how to do this at church, right? That's why we're always feeding each other. It nourishes not only our bodies, but our community, our relationships. Okay, so there's all these really good reasons that Jesus might have asked for a snack, for a meal. But isn't Jesus God, right? I mean, didn't he come back from the dead? I mean, couldn't he have kind of taken care of that little quirk of human necessity? Filled himself up before he came back? Feeding God feels kind of weird. I mean, God created everything, right? Why should we feed God? Well, it turns out if you dig back into our tradition, there's actually a whole lot in our Bible, in our collection of stories and traditions about feeding God. If you open some of those first books of the Bible, some of the law, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Numbers, all those ones that with intimidating names, they're full of these sacrifices, ritual sacrifices and burnt offerings. We may think of these as really archaic and maybe a little irrelevant to us, hard to relate to. But listen, you shall offer a burnt offering, a pleasing odor to God. It's this idea of feeding God out of our own abundance. People would offer out of a sense of gratitude and wonder in order to draw near to God. So burnt offerings may seem a little archaic, but how about drawing near to God by gathering around a meal? We know something about that. How about drawing near to God by offering something out of our abundance? Oh, we do that. So maybe we do feed God. We sort of sustain God's presence in our midst by giving, maybe even sacrificing a little bit out of our own abundance. And so we do that as a way to draw near to God. But it's not just up to us to draw near to God. God is always trying to draw near to us, waiting to encounter us. And so before Easter, before Good Friday, when Jesus was just hanging around with his disciples, he said to them, I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. And they were all like, wait, what? When did that happen? When did we give you something to eat or drink? And he said, just as you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Just as you did it to those who are neglected by society, those of our community who may be on the margins, maybe making minimum wage or not even. Just as you did it and welcomed undocumented people, refugees, systematically excluded people, you did it for me. Just as you welcomed people of every sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, so you welcomed me. Just as you fed those who were hungry, who could not afford to put food on the table, so you fed me. And we're still getting to do this. Jesus continues to show up to us, asking for something to eat. This week, just down the corner, on the corner of Bancroft and Telegraph, thousands of people gathered to stand with fast food workers, demanding a fair living wage. Fast food giants, which feed so many people around the world, maybe not exactly nourishing them, but feeding, but not always paying their workers a fair wage. And so Jesus stands with those hungering for justice and hungering for enough to put food on the table and pay their rent. And Jesus comes asking for something to eat, which is part of why we give to the food pantry every week. It's why we're walking in the crop walk. Because there's millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world and in our own community who are hungry. And so we do that not just because it's a nice thing to do. We do it as a way to feed God in our midst, as a way of drawing near to God, as a way of welcoming the risen Christ who showed up as a hungry stranger, asking for something to eat. And so we're going to raise some money this afternoon, and that's a great thing, but we're also going to witness with our feet, witness and testify with our feet that in the risen Christ we are all made one, and that injustice anywhere, as Reverend Dr. King said, is a threat to justice everywhere, and that hunger pangs in the belly of any mother or child or brother pains and matters to all of us. Because the resurrection, friends, it is a full body experience. So when somebody asks you, got something to eat around here, whether it's your big lug of a brother, or your cranky child, or your spouse wanting to reconnect, or a new friend asking you to go grab something to eat, got anything to eat, or if it's a stranger on the sidewalk on your way out of church, it might just be the risen Christ showing up to say, hello, here I am. Want to share a meal? Amen? Amen.